Imagine waking up to the sound of rushing water, not from your faucet, but from outside your bedroom window. You pull back the curtain, and suddenly, you're staring at what looks like a river where your driveway used to be. Cars are half submerged, neighbors are wading through knee-deep water, and the sky, still pouring. Sounds like something out of a disaster movie, right? But this isn't fiction. This has been the reality for thousands of people recently, especially in parts of Texas and North Carolina. Streets have turned into streams, homes have been swallowed by floodwaters, and communities have been left scrambling to stay safe, dry, and sane. Now, we've all seen weird weather headlines, heat waves where it should be snowing, snowstorms in places that rarely see a flake, and sudden hail out of nowhere. It seems like every other week, Mother Nature is throwing a new curveball. But something about what's happening in Texas and North Carolina feels off, more intense, more destructive, and a whole lot more unpredictable. So, in this video, we're zeroing in on these two states. What exactly happened during the recent floods? Why were they so severe? Is it just bad luck? Or is there something deeper going on with our weather systems? And most importantly, what does all this mean for the rest of us? We'll walk you through the jaw-dropping events that unfolded in both Texas and North Carolina. We'll break down the science without putting you to sleep. We'll dig into the warnings, the responses, and the aftermath. And we'll talk about why this might be a sign of what's coming next. Because weird weather isn't just weird anymore. It's becoming dangerously normal. Let's start with Texas, where everything's bigger, including the storms. Texas is no stranger to big weather. Tornadoes, hailstorms, even hurricanes. Folks there have seen it all. But what happened recently took even seasoned Texans by surprise. In early July 2025, Central Texas faced one of its most devastating floods in a century. Fueled by the remnants of Tropical Storm Barry, parts of the hill country, including Streeter and Marble Falls, received up to 20 inches of rain in just a few days, July 3 to 7. The Guadalupe River surged more than 26 feet in just 45 minutes, sweeping away cabins and camps along its banks. At Camp Mystic, a summer camp for girls, the flood tore through the grounds, resulting in at least 119 deaths, with over 170 still missing, making it the deadliest flood in Texas since 1921. This kind of catastrophic flooding wasn't an isolated freak event. It's part of a pattern because in 2024, something very similar happened. In early June 2024, the skies opened up over parts of southeast Texas, and they didn't let up for days. Houston, already known for its flooding issues, was hit especially hard. Within just 48 hours, some areas saw more than 15 inches of rain. That's not just a heavy downpour, that's a deluge. Streets turned into rivers, parking lots became lakes. Entire neighborhoods were cut off from the rest of the world, as water surged through the roads and into homes. Videos started popping up online. Cars floating away, water gushing down stairwells, families being rescued by boat from their rooftops. It wasn't just Houston either. Cities like Beaumont, Conroe, and even parts of the hill country got hammered. Rural communities, with fewer resources and less drainage infrastructure, were hit just as bad, if not worse. Rescue crews worked around the clock. Over 400 high water rescues were reported in the greater Houston area alone. Hundreds of people had to be evacuated. Shelters opened their doors, schools shut down, power outages left more than 100,000 customers in the dark across the state. And the damage? We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, and those numbers could climb even higher as assessments come in. Now, flooding in Texas isn't unheard of, but what made this event so jaw-dropping was how quickly things escalated. In many cases, the National Weather Service issued flash flood warnings after neighborhoods were already underwater. That's how fast the rain was falling. And for people living through it, the speed was terrifying. One Houston resident told reporters, "We've lived here for 20 years. We've seen flooding before, but not like this. It came out of nowhere." Meteorologists describe the event as training, when storm cells hit the same spot over and over like cars on a track. And the weird part? This wasn't even hurricane season. There was no named storm, just a stubborn low-pressure area pulling moisture in from the Gulf of Mexico and refusing to budge. Because the ground was already saturated from earlier spring rains, it didn't take much for everything to get overwhelmed. The result? One of the worst non-hurricane flooding events the state has seen in recent years. So, what made this flooding in Texas so brutal? Was it just a fluke, a freak storm that came out of nowhere? Not quite. Let's break it down, starting with the weather itself. Meteorologists say this wasn't your typical spring rainstorm. It was part of a slow-moving, low-pressure system that stalled over southeast Texas and just lingered. That system pulled warm, moisture-rich air straight from the Gulf of Mexico. And when that warm air hit cooler air over land, boom, non-stop rainfall. But the real kicker? It wasn't just how much rain fell, it was how fast it fell and where it landed. Some neighborhoods got absolutely hammered while others, just a few miles away, stayed relatively dry. That's what makes training storms so dangerous. It's like sitting under a waterfall while everything around you stays in a light drizzle. And when the ground is already soaked and drainage systems are backed up, flooding becomes almost inevitable.
Now here's where things get even more interesting and honestly more concerning. Texas has been dealing with rapid urban growth for years. Cities like Houston have expanded at breakneck speed. That means more roads, more parking lots, and more concrete, less grass and dirt to soak up rainwater. When a storm dumps inches of water in a matter of hours, there's nowhere for it to go. It just rushes off the pavement and straight into people's homes. Experts have been warning about this for a while now. The more we build, the more we disrupt natural drainage. Combine that with aging stormwater systems and flood maps that haven't been updated in years, and you've got a recipe for disaster. And then there's the climate angle. We're seeing more and more once-in-a-century storms happening every few years. That's not a coincidence. As the planet warms, the atmosphere can hold more moisture. So when storms form, they have more water to work with. That means heavier downpours, longer storms, and, yep, more flooding. Even small increases in temperature can supercharge weather systems. Think of it like adding fuel to a fire. The result? Storms that grow faster, dump more water, and leave behind more damage. And let's not forget sea level rise, especially in areas near the coast. As water levels rise, drainage systems become less effective. High tides can push floodwaters back into neighborhoods instead of out to sea. It's a combination of ingredients: natural weather patterns, human development, climate shifts, and aging infrastructure, all crashing together at the worst possible time. What happened in Texas wasn't just unlucky, it was a warning, a very loud, very wet warning. While Texas was battling one wave of floodwater after another, North Carolina was quietly facing its own crisis. Fast forward to early July 2025, and North Carolina was back underwater, this time thanks to the lingering remnants of Tropical Storm Chantal. Over just a couple of days, central parts of the state were hit with 8 to 10 inches of rain, overwhelming creeks, rivers, and entire drainage systems. The Haw River near Burlington rose to an astonishing 32.5 feet, nearly breaking its all-time flood record. Meanwhile, the Eno River in Durham swelled to 25.6 feet, exceeding previous flood levels from 2018. Chatham County alone reported more than 100 roads flooded, and rescue crews carried out over 150 water rescues statewide. In Chapel Hill, at least 60 people were displaced after rising water filled homes and roads. It might sound unbelievable, but this wasn't the first time in recent memory North Carolina had to deal with such chaos. In late June 2024, a slow-moving storm system rolled in and parked itself over the state. It didn't bring thunderous winds or flashy headlines, it brought days of non-stop, soaking rain. Some areas saw between 8 to 10 inches of rainfall in under 72 hours, overwhelming already saturated ground and outdated drainage systems. It all started in the West. Mountain towns like Boone, Asheville, and Morganton saw creeks and rivers rise rapidly. Flash floods tore through rural roads, submerged homes, and even caused several small bridges to collapse. The speed of the water caught residents off guard. Emergency alerts went out, but for many it was already too late to act. A local emergency official in Watauga County told reporters, "This was one of the fastest rising floods we've seen in recent years. People had minutes, not hours, to respond." As the storm moved east, its impact grew wider. The Neuse, Tar, and Cape Fear rivers began to swell. Water levels climbed fast, with river gauges reporting stages 3 to 5 feet above flood level in several counties. The central Piedmont region saw roads turned into rivers and farmland transformed into swamps. In Craven, Duplin and Lenoir counties, the situation escalated quickly. Residents of communities near Kinston and Newbern were forced to evacuate homes that had never flooded before, not even during hurricanes. And that's the strange part. There was no hurricane, no named storm, no advanced TV coverage urging people to board up windows or flee. It was just rain. Persistent, exhausting, relentless rain. At one shelter in Goldsboro, families trickled in overnight, many of them clutching wet bags of belongings, still in shock. Emergency crews performed over 150 water rescues statewide, many of them in rural areas where help is harder to reach. Down on the farms, the damage was devastating. Thousands of acres of corn, soybeans and tobacco were ruined just weeks before harvest. For many small farmers already stretched thin, this storm may mean the difference between staying afloat and going under. In total, more than 200 roads were shut down, dozens of schools closed, and power outages affected tens of thousands. And yet, many residents say this flood felt different, not just because of the damage, but because of the silence before it. No build-up, no drama, just the quiet sound of rain, and then water where it didn't belong. One longtime resident in Kinston put it best. "We didn't expect it, we didn't prepare, and now we're trying to figure out how to clean up. Again." North Carolina has dealt with hurricanes, sure, but this was something else, something quieter, something stranger. And it's not just a fluke. So what exactly made this event so different? What's going on behind the scenes with the weather patterns in North Carolina? Let's dive into that next. To understand what happened, we've got to talk about how a few key ingredients lined up just right, or depending on how you look at it, just wrong. The first big factor was a stalled frontal system, a boundary between hot and cool air that decided to hang out over the state for several days. Normally, these systems move along fairly quickly, but in this case it slowed down to a crawl and just stayed. And when you combine that kind of stagnant air with warm moisture rising up from the Gulf and the Atlantic, you get repeated waves of heavy rain that don't know when to quit. Meteorologists have a name for this too: atmospheric rivers. These are narrow bands of moisture in the sky that act like conveyor belts for rain. One of these rivers set up over the southeastern US, funneling water straight into North Carolina for days. The result? Soil that couldn't soak up any more water, rivers that had no room left, and neighborhoods that went from damp to drowned overnight. But it wasn't just about the rain. It was about how the rain interacted with infrastructure and geography. Many of the areas hardest hit in North Carolina were in places that weren't considered high risk for floods. That meant people weren't prepared, mentally or physically, and the drainage systems, not built for this kind of rain. Older towns and rural communities often rely on outdated flood maps that don't reflect today's reality. That means water ends up where it's not supposed to be, over roads, in homes, and across fields. But here's where it gets even more unsettling. Climate experts say these kinds of floods, ones without hurricanes or named storms, are becoming more common. Warmer ocean temperatures are changing rainfall patterns. The southeastern US, including North Carolina, is seeing more intense rain events, even if overall annual rainfall hasn't changed that much. Basically, it's not raining more often, it's just raining harder when it does. And for places near the coast, sea level rise adds another layer of trouble. Higher water levels mean rivers can't drain as quickly into the ocean, so water backs up inland. It turns a heavy rainstorm into a dangerous flood. All of this is part of a larger pattern that scientists have been tracking for years. The weather in North Carolina and in much of the US isn't just off. It's shifting in a very real, very measurable way. And the scary part? This probably isn't a one-time event. It could be a preview of what's coming more often and with more force. By now, one thing's clear. What happened in Texas and North Carolina isn't just a pair of isolated events. These floods share more than just bad timing. They might be part of a much bigger story.
Let's look at the patterns. Both floods happened within weeks of each other. Neither was caused by a hurricane or tropical storm, neither came with a dramatic countdown or widespread national coverage in the days before, and both struck with unexpected force, turning average neighborhoods into disaster zones. That's already unusual. But when you stack that next to what's happening around the world, things start to look even weirder. In just the past few months, we've seen extreme weather events popping up across the globe. Floods in southern Brazil displaced tens of thousands. Parts of Germany and Belgium got soaked by record-setting rainfall. Even places like the United Arab Emirates, known more for sand than storms, saw flash floods shut down entire highways. It's almost like weather is acting off, not just in intensity, but in how unpredictable it's become. We're seeing more rainfall in shorter bursts, and those bursts are hitting with greater force. That means floods are forming faster, with less warning, and affecting areas that were never considered high risk before. So what's driving all of this? A big part of it comes back to climate change. We hear about it all the time, but here's what it actually means when it comes to flooding. Warmer air holds more moisture. That means when it rains, it doesn't just drizzle, it pours. Storm systems become more powerful, and they linger longer because changing jet stream patterns are slowing them down. The end result? Rain that doesn't just fall, it dumps. It's like weather systems are being put on slow motion mode, but with the volume turned way up. And when you mix that with decades of development, outdated drainage systems, and flood maps that don't reflect current risk levels, the results can be catastrophic. There's also an emotional and psychological toll here that numbers don't capture. People are tired, they're stressed. Imagine cleaning out your house from one flood, only to hear that another major storm is heading your way a few months later. The anxiety builds, the cost of rebuilding piles up, and for some families, moving away becomes the only option if they can afford it. This is especially tough in working-class communities. Insurance doesn't always cover flood damage, and recovery funding can be slow or uneven. The people hit hardest are often the ones with the fewest resources to bounce back. But it's not all bad news. Events like these are finally getting local and state governments to act. In both Texas and North Carolina, there's been a renewed push for better flood planning. New zoning laws, improved stormwater infrastructure, and modernized flood maps are starting to roll out. Still, many experts warn, we're playing catch-up. If what we've seen recently is a glimpse of the new normal, then we're going to need more than sandbags and sump pumps.
We'll need big-picture thinking, coastal resilience, smarter construction, and yes, climate action that looks beyond tomorrow's forecast. Let's talk about solutions and why there's still hope. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, like these disasters are just part of an unstoppable force. But the truth is, there are things we can do, both big and small, to reduce the impact and prepare for what's coming. Let's start at the community level. In places like Houston and coastal North Carolina, local governments are beginning to rethink how cities are designed. That means more green spaces like parks and wetlands that can naturally absorb rainwater instead of concrete sending it straight into the streets. Some cities are upgrading their storm drains, building retention ponds, and adding flood barriers where they're needed most. Updating flood maps is a big one too. A lot of the maps used by insurance companies and zoning departments are outdated. Some are based on weather patterns from 30 or 40 years ago. With today's climate shifts, they just don't reflect reality anymore. More accurate maps mean better preparation and fewer surprises. But the change doesn't stop at City Hall. Homeowners can take steps too, like installing sump pumps, elevating critical utilities, or even landscaping yards in ways that direct water away from foundations. In high-risk zones, some are choosing to rebuild higher or move entirely, though that's obviously a tough and expensive decision. And here's the hard truth. Flood insurance matters. It's not required everywhere, but more people are starting to realize how important it is. 1 inch of water in a home can cause tens of thousands of dollars in damage. Insurance doesn't stop the flood, but it sure helps after the water goes down. Then there's the bigger picture, the national and global response. On the federal level, there's growing momentum to invest in climate resilience. That means funding for stronger levees, better weather forecasting systems, and helping communities relocate from high-risk areas if needed. FEMA and other agencies are starting to shift from reaction to prevention, which is a huge mindset change. And at the global level, we've got to talk about climate change. Reducing emissions, switching to cleaner energy sources,
and taking science seriously. It's all connected. Because while we can't stop every storm, we can slow the forces that are making them worse. Now, none of this is instant. There's no magic switch, but every step, from local zoning changes to national climate policy, adds up. And here's the good news. People are paying attention. Communities are coming together. Scientists, engineers, and everyday folks are asking better questions and pushing for better solutions. Because weird weather might be here to stay, but we don't have to face it helpless.
So what did we just witness? Two very different states, two devastating floods, no hurricanes, no epic storm names. Just rain, relentless, record-breaking rain that left homes underwater and lives turned upside down. In Texas, the water came fast and furious, swallowing streets and neighborhoods with barely a warning. In North Carolina, it crept in silently, filling rivers and fields until there was nowhere else for it to go. Both events were shocking. Both felt, well, weird. But when you step back and look at the bigger picture, they don't seem so random anymore. This isn't just bad luck. It's not just two storms. It's a sign of something larger, something shifting. Our weather is changing and fast. What used to be once in a generation is becoming every few years. Storms are stronger. Rainfall is heavier. Floods are hitting places that used to feel safe. And if we treat these events like isolated accidents, we'll stay one step behind every time. But here's the other side of the story, the part with hope. We're not powerless, not even close. We have the tools, the data, and the brains to adapt. We can build smarter, plan better, and respond faster. We can update maps, improve infrastructure, support climate action, and protect vulnerable communities before disaster strikes, not just after. And maybe the most important piece of all, awareness. The more we talk about this, the more we pay attention, not just to the headlines, but to the patterns, the better prepared we'll be, because weird weather isn't going away, but being caught off guard, that's something we can change.